I lived in the, what was called the Moonlight Bay house
Oh, yes, yeah.
until 1948. And in
Moonlight Bay was just
the
on the
second
sub-
house from the corner.
Uh-huh,
The
yes.
third house down is now the men's, or used to be the men's club. Okay? The fourth house was my grandparents' house at one point in time. Anyways, like I said, I came here, and my father was Herb Webster, and my mother was Doris. Where else would you like me to go from there?
So why did they come out? Why did they?
Well, my father was originally from here,
Uh-huh.
but he didn't know about the home place. And it wasn't until '48 my father found out from the government that it was owed for back taxes.
Ah,
That's why my father ended up in the old home place, my grandfather's house. Anyways, we lived in that house until '62 when my father passed away. And I was already out working in the neighborhood. And then my mother, I took a trade and moved into the city, and my mother come and lived with me.
And your sisters?
Because she didn't have any way of driving. Like, she had no driver's license and never learned.
which was
And-
pretty common in those days too.
Yes.
Like my mom never drove till she was 45. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't think Dave's mom, no, she never.
And
she
because
never
I was going
had
to
a
school at the SAIT, my mother was taking nursing, and she went with me to the SAIT too.
Oh,
So I used to, we had different times, but my was her way of rides, because she didn't have any income. So she lived with me, and my sister stayed on the place, Jenny, the youngest one, and eventually she moved in with me. So I had a rented apartment in the city, but, and then in 1966, Lorraine and I got married, and we moved out here because the place was vacant.
and we've been here ever since.
We've been here for 51 years in that house.
Yeah.
What sort of, when you were a kid though, like a young person, you said you did like chores and stuff and worked around here. What sort of work would you be?
Farm work,
Farm work.
grunt work.
Just for your family or for
No.
you went different people and
Well, for the people around our place, I mean, it was always work,
yeah.
because it was survival.
Yeah.
My parents, or my father, spent more time in the Colonel Belcher Hospital than he did at home. And so the
That's
most of the time
from
he was
war
on.
injuries.
Yeah. Yeah, he was damaged pretty bad in the
Mhm.
war. And by the time I was 19, I guess it was, my father passed away. And, but I worked for the farmers around the way to help the family. I worked for Laycock's. I worked for Ellis's,
Mm-hmm.
Strikers. I don't know if you remember them.
I know Strikers because I
Yeah.
went to school with Linda Stryker and we became very good friends. So
Okay.
we're going to do the Stryker story as one of these stories
He
too.
used to take me to church all the time.
Did he? Oh gosh, yes, they were very committed Christians. So
So anyways, those are the kind of jobs I did
Got
around.
any recall on how much they paid you?
I got $5 a day from Strikers and all the work you could do.
Yeah.
When I worked
$5 a day?
$5 a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that started at sunrise and went to long after sunset a lot of times.
in the summer.
But you need to go back and tell about the things that you did as a kid. You know, like you used to go out with the boat and collect all the driftwood for firewood because you had a coal and wood stove, and the coal and wood stove that I learned how to cook on when we got married.
Our house had no facilities as far as plumbing.
Mm-hmm.
It had outside toilet. It had wooden coal and gas lights. Kerosene most of the time.
And that's what Dave and I came out to, was, in
That-
fact, when we didn't get power until the the 27th of January of 1967. And the reason I remember it so well, it was my brother's birthday.
Yeah.
And we came home, Dave was on night shift, and we came home, and I think it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. We'd gotten all of these electrical things as wedding presents, but never ever been able to use them. Well, here we are, we're like a couple of little kids. We had everything plugged in, see how it worked or whatever.
Exciting, that would be, yeah, just,
And
yeah.
flicking the switch to we actually had power. And even long after that, because you got to know where things were in the dark, right? So you just feel your way along. Or you had an oil lamp that, was in the next room, so you kind of had a hint of light. But
So how would you, so you'd have to do electrical wiring in the house?
yes, my parents came out
With a
with
friend.
Dave and a friend, and they did that.
We cut holes through the
This
plaster
lap,
and the
yeah.
lap.
Yeah, plaster and lap, yeah.
And we got electricity fed in and put the meter on the outside, and I was the gopher to go through between, because there's a bit of a crawl space between the ceiling and the attic, or the roof, because
Yeah.
it had a sloped roof on it.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And it
Anyways.
cost us $50 back then to get hooked up to power.
Yeah.
And we came home that night and there were the 3 poles coming down the roadway. And it was, and so then it was like, oh, and we actually have
Power.
wires to the house too, so it was so exciting.
Yeah.
When we were kids at home, most of the property that we have right now was all garden.
Oh.
Yeah.
And so,
Mostly vegetable garden, like
Yes.
for food,
Yeah.
yeah.
get up early in the morning in the summertime there and put the garden in and weed it, and you carried water from the lake on a carrying piece that goes over your shoulders. What do I call it? We got a name for it.
Well, I'll think about it.
My dad
after.
made me one with adjustable snaps on it so I could carry the pails.
Yeah.
And I used to carry water up from the lake, and my sisters helped me. Sometimes we used a big wagon. We had a homemade wagon, and we used to pull water up for watering all the plants. And so, and then you'd be out there early in the morning picking bugs off the potatoes and putting them in a can of oil. Running around using DDT to pump them all over
Yeah.
things to keep bugs off, and down the basement.
Was your mom a big gardener, or is that?
Well, she had to be. I mean, she had all those mouths to feed.
So-
And there were no stores here. There was nothing.
Yeah.
There was no stores here.
I have 3 older sisters and 2 twin sisters and myself, plus my parents. So there's
Yeah.
a fair amount of groceries.
So mostly a lot of potatoes and
Yeah.
carrots and,
Well,
We
stu-
used
and
to
stuff
always-
that can be canned.
We always had 2 pigs every spring.
oh yeah,
We had
yeah.
2 pigs. And originally we had a cow, a milk cow,
Uh-huh.
because we used to milk that all the time.
Mhm.
As time went on, then the milk cow, I don't know what happened to it, but it disappeared. I don't know if we ate it or what happened. The pigs every fall, we'd take 1 pig and kill it late in the fall, about when the frost would hit, so it wouldn't spoil. And it used to hang in an ice house. We had an ice house that we used to haul ice out of the lake and put it in the ice house. That was our cooling
Fridge,
system.
yeah.
Wow.
And so when you get home from school, you'd take the slop pail out and dump it in the old cistern, or not cistern, cesspool.
Yeah.
And we had a cistern in the back of the house. We used to put the ice down there, and then in the summertime we'd catch the rain off the house to fill the cistern.
Mhm.
Plus we used to haul water from the lake all the time,
Yeah.
because there wasn't enough.
What was the quality of the water in the lake now? I mean,
Absolutely fantastic.
yeah.
I was totally raised on that water, because all the wells on our property at that time weren't fit to feed even livestock.
Wow.
They were that bad for water.
So you drank the water out of the lake, yeah.
I drank the water out of the lake.
Well, you used it all summer long, right?
Well, we used it year round because we used to haul ice
Yeah, you'd have the
and
frozen
we'd
water
haul
in
water.
the cistern, yeah.
And then later on, when the cistern sprung a leak, we ended up putting barrels downstairs, and we used to tar the inside of the barrels so they wouldn't rust. So you always got that nice taste of tar, you know.
Yeah,
Oh, gosh.
yeah.
Well,
So
Go Tarzan
anyways,
fight.
well, and the tower that we have, your dad used that, he filled that all summer long.
that actually was put there, I believe, by my grandfather,
Oh,
but
your
I don't know
grandfather.
for sure. Anyways,
That's a little water tower that you have
Yes.
on your property.
Well,
Okay.
it's
It's
a
big.
good size, yeah.
anyways, that, we used to fill that, we had an old Model A car, had been rolled over. And so we cut it down and cut the drive shaft off and made a wooden pulley on it. And that's how it drove the pump. So we only pumped water and used it very sparingly. And then when the weather would start to cool down, we'd have to carry all the water up by pails. And in the wintertime, we had a couple sleds that we used. They were about that wide and they were about 6 feet long. Cut pieces of ice and lay them on there and bring it up. Slide them down the basement on a plank and then put them into the cistern. My dad couldn't do much of anything.
'Cause he was,
So there's lots for you kids.
So
to
it was
enjoy.
the older girls, and of course they left at young ages.
yeah. I can see
Everybody
why.
left.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just checking that.
And because I was the only boy, I got to do lots of the bull work.
Yeah.
And so the same with the gardening. We used to put up about 500 pounds of spuds in the summertime or the fall, and probably 200 to 300 pounds of carrots and parsnips. And so, and those were all put in sand, except for the potatoes. The carrots and parsnips were put in some dry sand.
And was this in a root cellar?
It
It was
was
downstairs.
underneath the house in a hand-dug basement.
Oh, okay, because
And we
so the
dug
dirt
that
would
basement
keep the
little
temperature.
bit by little bit every
Like
year.
a root cellar, yeah.
Anyways, and my mother would can, you know, beans, peas, everything out of the garden. So it was, you had to make it through the next year. You couldn't run to the grocery store.
Yeah.
And in the fall of the year, we would go in and pick up, we had an old trailer that we used to pull behind the car. And we would buy sacks of bran and sacks of flour, those 100-pound sacks. And we'd bring in there, we had those cardboard containers with the lid that snapped on them. You put the
Remember
flour
around
in
the
there
barrel,
and the
yeah.
sugar and the oatmeal, and the fall of the year we'd bring all of those there. Because most of the time you couldn't even get the vehicles out of the buildings back then because it used to be like 5-6 feet of snow.
Yes. Yeah.
And I can remember one year of cutting steps down the snowbank to get into the chicken house.
I was going to ask you, did you have any chickens
Oh,
or,
yeah.
or ducks out in the lake there? Anything?
Yeah, we used to have like
Yes, we've always,
75,
yeah.
80 chickens, and
Yeah.
then as the season wore on, they got less and less. You know, we go out, this
Yeah.
one's ready for supper.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a matter of survival, basically.
Boy.
And so that was the beginning of our lives. So anyways, no, I'm
So you mentioned you went to school here? Like, so what
yes,
school
my
did
first
you go
school
to?
was Conridge, or
Rockland.
Rockland High School.
Yeah.
Do you know
No, not
Rockland?
Rockland High. Was it high school?
There was a high school.
Yeah,
It was
Rockland was
every
between
age, wasn't
here, Chestermre, and
You know where Costco is in East Hills?
yeah.
There's a Quonset there.
Yes. Yeah.
Just a little bit north?
Right there was where
Rockland.
the elementary school was,
Uh-huh.
and just a little further behind that was a big brick building that was divided in 2 pieces. One side took from grade 4 to grade 7, and then in the other half, the high school part was from grade 8 to grade 11. 12 had to go to the city. Grade 1 to grade 3 was in the smaller building that was just south of the big brick building. One teacher taught everything. One teacher for the elementary, one teacher from 3 to 7, and one teacher from 8 to 11, the other one. There was only 3 teachers in the school. And when I first started there, we rode a school bus off and on when things were not working or the bus was broken. We had an old nag that we used to call a horse, and the 3
Poor
older
thing.
girls and myself used to ride that to school. It'd take us a good chunk of the day to get there.
All together on the one horse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, what an excuse
We-
for being
I
late
used to
for
call it the
school.
swayback because the thing was like this, and the girls would put me in the center, and the The oldest one
You
would
were
ride.
the youngest, right?
No,
No. Oh.
no, I'm the,
He's the oldest of the second
Ah,
bunch.
My-
Yeah.
my half-sister's, is 10 years older than I am,
Grace.
Grace, and then Shirley was 2 years younger than she was, so she would have been
year and a
8
half.
years. And then there was Dorothy, which would have been 6 years difference.
so did your, like nowadays, parents would take their kids to the first day of school, right? So was that?
I
do you
don't
recall your
remember my
first
dad
day
even
to-
being around because I remember most of the time I'd say to my mom, "Where's Dad?" Well, he's still in the hospital.
Mm.
So you went to school, for your first day of school was on your own with your sister, so, right? So
Yeah.
just as young. And how, any recalls of that as far as,
I remember riding in Len
Intimidated
Baldwin's
or-
bus, and his bus had the
whose bus,
seats-
sorry?
Len Baldwin's
Oh,
bus.
Len, okay.
Yeah, he was the bus
Oh,
driver
my-
for,
Oh,
yeah.
I know, he was the bus driver, I think, when our kids started to go here, yeah.
Yeah, in the,
Oh, yeah, he was,
I know.
yeah.
The seats didn't go crossways like they do now on the bus. They
They go
ran
around
down
both
both sides, and then a set of benches down the center, the same on either side,
Yeah.
just like benches.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and of course, the roads back then used to be something else, and we end up going halfways out and around the country picking up people before we'd get to school. And because we were closest, Len used to come out and pick us up and go out and around.
Were there paved roads or were there mostly just gravel
Oh, yeah, there were no
and
paved.
dirt and?
Yeah.
The only paved road was the number 1A highway, and that thing was so narrow, and the ditches were really deep. In fact, one year I remember there was a bulldozer going crossways on the road to open the road in the snow. You couldn't even see the bulldozer for the snow, that's how high it was. Like there was 6 feet of snow from a blizzard.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine that said that he came from, I think from Saskatchewan, but he said the number 1A was the highway.
Yes.
It's the only
So
highway.
people, yeah, so I was
No,
thinking,
no,
well,
the one A
but-
is 17th Avenue.
yeah, but he
Yeah.
said the bridge, that you might recall it, he said the bridge across the river was a one-way bridge, so you had to kind of wait, like there was only one stream of traffic that went by, and then you had to, now he said it was in 54, I think he said, but.
That sounds about right, because I was gonna say, I remember as a kid, that's how we discovered that Dave and I, when I took him home to introduce him to my parents,
Mhm.
my mom asked him where he was from, and that was when we discovered that when we used to come out here, and when I was a kid, fishing, and there was this boy who used to come down to the bridge and play with me, and it was Dave.
Yeah,
what was
Yeah.
that cute?
Yeah, it was,
so you were from Calgary.
yes, I was born and raised in Calgary, yeah.
So you know what we need to say on the recording is exactly where your little farm was in terms of where people would know it is now. So,
Well, the barn is the one thing that hasn't, it's,
It's a landmark.
I was
It's
gonna
been
say,
there since
the barn is the-
1911.
the barn is the only thing we haven't moved, other than the poplar trees, right?
Yeah.
Everything else we've moved.
right.
So the barn was built originally, his grandfather built it because the peg is right there in the corner. I guess back then there was no setbacks or whatever,
Yeah.
so the legal peg is like,
It's 4
there.
inches away from the corner of the
yeah,
barn.
it's there. And so, of course, when they've done any surveying, I always used to say to them, there's a peg right there. So the barn has sort of been the,
Right.
In
and
72, when they were going to redo the highway, surveyors were all over the place checking the land. And I caught this guy digging at the corner of my barn, and I asked him what he was up to. He says, "There's a surveyor's peg here," and I'm going, "Really?" Said, "I've been here a long time." And I said, "I don't recall it." And he dug down about that far, and there was the surveyor's peg. The original surveyor's peg that
Wow.
was put back in the early 1900s when it was surveyed.
And there used to be,
Wow.
well, we're down towards the lake, there were 3 there too, because when I'd see the surveyors come, I'd always say, well, you can go down there, there's 3 there, so.
There's actually, there was 5 when they started doing the development. There was one in the center, and north, east, and south, so they could always tell. back
This
then
was
they
the
didn't
cove,
have-
when the cove,
Oh, no,
This
this
is
was
before
long,
even
this
the
was
court
long,
was even
long,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
long before. I think they
Yeah.
were trying to do, that would have been shortly after when they redid the highway.
Yeah, well, when
Because-
they were just before they did the highway, he was in there digging, cause I'm going, what the earth are you doing down here? He's digging big
Is it
holes.
which highway are we,
The 1A,
The one
one
A
A.
highway.
where the bridge is.
Yeah.
they
That
kind of
was,
straightened that out, didn't they, or something?
Yes,
Yeah.
in
Well, yeah.
72, they straightened that
no,
out.
it was before that. It was before that because my grandfather sat on the porch watching and he passed away in 71.
Okay, well then, that's.
So yeah, it would have been earlier than that.
In the early 70s, they did the modification, straighten the highway out somewhat, changed the grade of the highway and everything,
Yeah.
Cause see,
and put in a wider bridge and,
originally we could go from the old house out either way. And there were mornings where Dave would be up at 5 in the morning and go with the truck to break a trail so we could get out onto the road to go to work.
yeah. And what's left now is where Founder's Point is.
Ye-
From your gate, you can see that you could go have
Yes,
gone either
yes.
way.
Well,
right?
yes,
And-
there is the pilings.
Right.
And
yeah.
that was the breakwaters that come
Yes.
around.
Yeah, so the
Yes.
little pond that's left there is
Well,
sort
yes,
of what's
I-
between the old 1A and where the new highway is, right?
when they originally put all of that in, they put wooden culverts in. Those wooden culverts were still there when they did the straightening of the highway,
Really?
but they plugged them all off when they redid the
Did
grade.
it?
Then when they put the sewer system in and the water system in for the around Chestermre here, for your areas there, they destroyed all of the wooden culverts when they put the water in. And then when they put the sewer in for the cove, there was one left and they cut right through that and collapsed it.
Oh, goodness.
And never replaced
So
it.
they're all gone. And there used to be breakwaters. Somebody put in the paper about the
Right.
breakwaters,
Yes.
and there was some down here. There was a set of boards that went across there. If
Yes.
you look in the picture.
The pictures, you can see that, and
Yep.
it's confusing to see what it is. It's kind of funny because out in the middle of the water, there's these like fences,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then there's the little
Yeah.
road, right?
But,
They were to stop because of the waves pounding up on the road, and because that road that goes past Founder's Point there, out towards the bridge, that was the original road that took you onto the bridge.
Bridge,
the
right.
Well, it
very
took,
narrow
yeah,
bridge.
I mean, you
Yeah.
come off of the bridge and you did kind of like if you were coming from Calgary, and did kind of like a left and in front of our place.
Yeah.
And back then, that was when, they ended up, approximately when did your mom and dad, open up the, Fisherman's Supply? Cause I ran into
It was
somebody,
early part of the 50s,
somebody here the other day and he goes.
very early part of the 50s.
Oh, yeah, he says, I used to get fishing supplies there.
My-
You know, they sold everything from tackle to
Oh.
Yeah.
rods to, I don't know, and then I think your mom sold her license?
Yes,
Did she sell fishing license?
yeah.
And
We
then-
rented fishing equipment and
Then-
sold minnows and,
Then well, that, and too, you used to, I can remember your mom telling stories about minnow seining. She said she'd be out in the water up to here, and a snake comes slither, and that was it. She was done.
No more minnows.
No, exactly, no, she wasn't gonna be there in the water.
Collecting minnows, yeah. So
Did you-
those
I was gonna ask you about
Yeah, go ahead.
the fishing, but did you go fishing to obviously catch fish, but to eat it? I mean, it's part of your,
Oh, yeah, they used to
like it was part
dry,
of
yeah.
your
in the
protein
ice
intake?
house,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
used to have maybe 150 fish hanging in there. And they were all dried,
Oh, wow.
they were smoked, but they were done with a liquid smoke.
wow.
Used to
Yeah,
paint it
that's-
on,
So were they the perch or the pike or both or
pike.
pike?
Nobody wasted time on perch because they were too small, they didn't
Yeah.
feed much for a mouth.
So you ate